That Naturopathic Podcast. TNP.
Hello there.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Cara Denisio.
And I'm Dr. David Miller, and we hear your frustrations. This show is for you.
This show is for you if you're feeling like your current healthcare strategy is not getting to the root cause or the underlying reasons for your health.
This show is for you if you've been told that you're fine, but you definitely don't feel very well.
This show is for you if you're walking out of your doctor's office with 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 medications without any mention of diet, lifestyle, or a long-term game plan.
This show is for you if you've got several specialists taking care of you, but no one is really putting it all together.
This show is for you if you believe that health should be part of healthcare. These problems have solutions.
We know it.
Our patients know it.
And we want you to know it.
Naturopathic medicine is the solution that you need to know about.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of That Naturopathic Podcast. I'm Dr. David Miller.
And I'm Dr. Cara Denisio.
And we hear your frustrations. And we're really pumped today to be here with a classmate of mine, actually. Her name is Dr. Kristina Cox, and she has a real mission to share with regards to recovering from cancer.
Yeah, and so Dr. Katrina has a physical practice in Bowmanville at the Equilibrium Healthcare Solutions Clinic. But what we're talking to her today about is her new program called the Cancer Remission Mission. And we're super pumped that she is really addressing a part of healthcare that has not got the attention that it deserves, because there's a lot of patients and people in this space, and we're really excited to hear the work she's doing to help support them. So welcome, Katrina.
Thank you.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Did I do well at introducing your 2 main roles that you have going on now?
Yeah. Basically, I've been practicing for about 10 years, and I love naturopathic medicine, but more importantly, I love empowering people. And I find that there's a big divide between the knowledge that we have as naturopaths and the general public. And so one of the big things is just to make sure that those that have survived cancer treatment learn how to regain control, rebuild themselves, and restore their health. And so that's where I started, and that's why I'm passionate. And so I'm working on the Cancer Remission Mission to help them keep moving forward.
And that's why you're such a good guest for us, Katrina. Like, I'm really pumped to hear that, because it's basically 100% aligned with what we're trying to do on this podcast, which is sort of educate people to understand the good work that people like you are doing out there. Because I feel like a lot of people don't understand the full scope and impact of what you can do as a naturopathic doctor, and they're lost, and there's a space between there, and that's where you are and that's where we are. So maybe without further ado, let's get started into why you're into this Cancer Remission Mission. It sounds really important.
It is important to me. I have a personal story. When I graduated naturopathic college, I was like, no, I don't want to be in cancer treatment. It's so overwhelming. It's emotional and everything else. And within the first 5 years, both of my parents were diagnosed with cancer. And so at different times, they were going through treatment in different phases. And the thing that struck me the most was that they were able to do a lot of integrative care while they went through it, although there were lots of people who weren't able to, just because of their oncologists and where they find themselves and how aggressive their cancer is. There's so many different reasons. But the most important thing that came for me was that after they were successfully through treatment, their oncologists, they went from living their life daily to going to treatment and just, trying to survive to, okay, we'll see you in 3 months or 6 months. We're going to do this blood test to follow up. And they were totally lost. They had no idea what had happened to them. They felt like they had lost time. They weren't capable of going back to work yet. There was just so much lack of guidance at that point. And I think from a naturopathic perspective, it's so important because we have more reoccurrences than we should ever have. We have more, these people are 50% more ill than the rest of the population, including depression, physical, issues. So it's just a really important place where, our system, our conventional system just totally, I think, doesn't have the right capability or the setup. The money is invested in actively treating the cancer, which is important, but more important is how do we go back to what we should be doing, And the answer that they got really infuriates me because they said, what can I do to stop it from coming back? Or, a lot of my patients will ask that question. And the big answer is there's nothing. Go home, do exactly what you were doing from before, and, we'll roll the dice and see how it works. And I think that to me is the definition of insanity, just like Albert Einstein says, if we just keep doing what we were doing, there's a reason that the cancer became the way it did. We don't know the reasons why necessarily, but we can start making better choices to get the buckets, of our immune system and our health to be better so that we can overcome those statistics of reoccurrence and whatnot. So.
Yeah, can you just sort of you mentioned the word integrative care.
Yeah.
Can you just sort of for people who may not know what integrative care means, can you sort of explain your interpretation of integrative care?
Yeah, okay. So here's how it goes. You might get the diagnosis of, having cancer, and then you have a couple of options going forward, right? The first option is to do everything your oncologist says, which is usually surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Second option is to try to convince your oncologist that you can, also do things alongside that, right? So that's where the integrative part would come in. So is there nutritional stuff we can do? Are there treatments that have been proven that they're okay or that they don't contraindicate, doing your chemotherapy or radiation? Do they make it better to use, and that kind of thing? And then there's a third option, which I don't particularly love, where patients say, I don't want to do any of that, and they just want to do naturopathic, interventions. And depending on how aggressive the cancer is, I always tell patients that that's never a really great choice in North America because we don't have access to everything, right? If we had unlimited access to all the things that are up and coming and everything, it would be a totally different scenario. But we don't. Things aren't, available in Canada. They're not available through naturopathic doctors. They're not approved therapies. There's all kinds of things that, get in the way of doing that third one. So from my perspective, integrative care during cancer treatment is just being able to do both things at the same time, right? Like when David and I went to school, we were told in our very first year that you couldn't do IV vitamin C at the same time as chemotherapy. And now, to the point where one of the doctors that was teaching us, who runs the Ottawa Integrative Cancer Care, was telling us, like, not even around it, not even 3 days after, like you have to wait until they're done chemotherapy completely. And now, depending on the types of chemotherapy that you're being prescribed, we know through research that that's not the truth. Right? Would I do them on the same day? No. Would I give the half-life, some time to do its job? Yes. But there are definitely treatments that have been proven, both from a conventional standpoint, that work really well at the same time as high-dose IV vitamin C. That's not what we're talking about now, though, because the patients that I'm talking about are whether they've been able to integrate during active treatment or not. Now is the time where they are like given carte blanche to do whatever they want, right? Now, once they've been diagnosed in remission, essentially, right? Or, at least stable, they're told to go home and keep doing what they were doing before. And that, that is the insanity of it all. They're not given guidance on, how to change things or what's going on with their body to be able to make a difference, right?
So from your lens, then your personal story, what did your parents say to you? Like, what was that, where were they? They've come through that acute treatment where it's all focused on, getting the cancer. What was their story afterwards? How did that look for them?
So at that point, they both turned to me and said, I don't believe that there's nothing more I can do. Right? That point, they went, we've been lucky to get through treatment as well as we have, but what can I do now? Like, what is there that makes the most sense, And because what happens a lot of times with the patients that I work with is that, while they're going through treatment, lots of their family members and their colleagues and their Google chats, because everybody knows that they essentially have cancer just depending on how you're searching your browsers and whatnot. And so ultimately, what happens at that point is that, I lost my train of thought. Hold on just a second. So ultimately what happens at that point is that they have to decide what they want to do and what they can put forth in. And the overwhelming amount of, research and support that they're getting is just great, but very overwhelming. And so the discussion from my mom was like, Katrina, I don't want this to come back. I know that there's an increased risk of this, but I'd like to get 15, 20 years before this cancer returns. What are we going to do about this, right? And so that's when you start going, okay, I have to figure out, it's not just about drinking green tea or, whether they eat vegetarian or vegan. Like, it's more than that. It has to be a symbiotic or synergistic type of treatment. And you have to consider the person, their genes, their lifestyle, all of the stuff that they want to achieve to be able to kind of put it back together.
So when people are done their treatment and it goes from, I'm not an expert in this by any means, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it goes from a pretty intense sort of period of time to then just a vacuum. And so they're sort of like floating in space on their own. When people are in that space, are they looking to do everything they can, like your parents in general? Like, are they looking to do as much as they can so it doesn't recur? Or are some people just like, okay, it's all gone, it's great, I can go back to doing exactly what I was doing before?
So I'm looking for I am working with, and the people that I see in my practice are more in the first category. The second category, you're not going to change them, right? Those are the people who are like, I loved eating McDonald's, I don't really care, I'm going to keep drinking even though I had liver cancer. Like, they're not interested in revolutionizing their lifetime experience. And that's fine. That's a choice that they make. It's a discussion that I have with patients. I always say, what kind of person are you? Do you put your money in your mattress to save it? Do you buy mutual funds, or do you play the stock market? You have to know where you're at and feel comfortable, because at the end of that, right, if you lose all your money in the stock market, you're going to feel okay about it because that's the type of person you are. But if you're not that person, you're going to beat yourself up, if you're a person who puts money in their mattress or whatever, right? So the reality is that the patients that are really in this category that really fit the remission mission, the Cancer Remission Mission, are the patients who either wanted to do integrative treatment and were convinced not to, right, by their oncologist or by their lifestyle or whatever, or patients who were able to do the integrative treatment, but they say, now what? Like, now what's next? Like, I want to make a difference in the outcomes of possible recurrence. I want to get back to living my life. I don't want to be depressed or upset or, tired all the time. A lot of them have kids, right? They've gotten through it. The scariest part, the trauma, because I will tell you, getting diagnosed with cancer is traumatic. It almost equates to being a deer caught in headlights, And
I would also add to that often the cancer therapy, I've had patients say to me that it was actually the process of the therapy that they literally have called it medical trauma. I've heard that term from a few of
I don't
patients.
think that you get through cancer treatment without a traumatic experience. There's a PTSD there. And one of the steps, which we can talk about a little later on, is addressing grief. And people don't really equate those two things together. And I will tell you, a lot of times in practice, when I say, where are you at in your stages of grief? People will start to bawl and they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like, nobody died. I didn't die. And I'm like, it's not that. It's the grief of the life that you had built, the grief of the loss of the year that had gone, the grief of the person that you knew so well. There's so many other things that you're into grieving, grieving loss of organs, like, looking at yourself in the mirror and not even recognizing your physical body anymore. That to me, you can't go backwards. But with the Remission Mission, what I'm hoping to accomplish is an actual support group of people who want to use it as an opportunity to put themselves back together. Because I feel like the people are left to try and figure it all out themselves, and it's way too overwhelming. And a lot of the support networks, I don't know if it's this where you guys are, but the support networks are great, but it's about a victimization. The big thing we had to work on with my dad, for example, was that he defined himself as a cancer survivor. So every time there was, some sort of event at his school, because he was a teacher at the time, that where they were raising money for cancer, he was identified as that person. And so it became like it was the Scarlet C, essentially, is what we talked about. He was carrying it around like it had defined who he was. And that was really a stumbling block for him to move on. Like, we don't do that if somebody has diabetes, right? They're not walking around like, I'm telling everybody, I carry this D around. That's not the same way with cancer. People do that. And I think that it's important to recognize it as a valid and important part of his health history, but it's not us. We have to learn to be able to, go through the steps of moving past it, right? And just using it as an opportunity to redefine ourselves, looking at our lives from before and saying, I really love that part about me. How do I make that happen now? Like long-term peripheral neuropathy is a perfect example. How do we get, so, especially if they're, somebody who does knitting or crafting or plays music, or, how do we keep that part of who they were and allow for them to heal enough that they are able to develop it into something new if they can't continue to do what they've done before, Like I've seen this happen with guitarists or bass players or drum players because of their fingers, right? They just can't even feel anything to be able to accomplish what they did before. But the thing, and then there's grief of that loss too, right? Because they no longer identify as their guitarist or whatever. And so then we have to translate that into something new so that they can feel healed, and not carrying around that trauma. Because we all know, naturopathically, we talk about this a lot, right? But the trauma gets, ingrained into our cells. And if we're not able to heal that, then those cells are not functioning at the best of their ability. And then just to get a little geeky, the mitochondria aren't able to create the energy that they need, right? In order for those cells to actually truly do the full healing. So it's not, yes, it's about what you eat. And yes, it's about how much hydration and all that other stuff. And we can talk about that, when you guys are ready. But the reality is that there is this huge psychological component that is not addressed. And I feel that the support networks that are there now are really not positive. And so we're trying to create a tribe or a group of people who really want to translate that, because and I really hate the word survivor, for example. It's like there was a war, and yes, it felt like it was war, but we have to move past that part, right? So we have to start to thrive afterwards, and really love life again. So
yeah, the psychological part is huge. Like I personally just had last a year and a half ago, I had a melanoma, like a malignant melanoma removed. And the first book I bought was, what was it? It's when bad things happen to good people.
Yep.
Because I was just like, man, I'm a naturopath. Like I sleep pretty well. I eat pretty well. I'm fairly nice to people. Like I have a lovely family. I have a lovely girlfriend. I have a work wife, Kara, here, who we argue and we have a good time. Like I have a pretty good life, and I was just trying to put the pieces together psychologically, going, what, like, did I deserve this? Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe where people feel like, what did I do to deserve this in a way? Because we have to accept the autonomy and responsibility to do something to change things as much as we can. But there is a bit of a like, WTF, why me?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the biggest reasons I think is a motivating factor, right? Because we don't have a crystal ball. And the way I describe it to patients is that it's not one thing. You have a bucket, for example, and the bucket is supposed to have holes in it, right? It's like a sieve, essentially. And, crap gets put in there. And your body is supposed to eliminate that crap. There is some stuff that you don't have control over. Where you live, for example. I mean, I live close to a nuclear plant, right? So the reality is, and so the reality is that there are things that are having an impact, and every single one of those things impacts everyone differently, right? And so when your bucket fills, right, that's when you create cells. What actually happens is your immune system doesn't recognize those cancer cells, because when you're a baby, you have cancer cells. Everybody does. All a cancer cell is a non-properly replicated cell of yourself. Why we end up with tumors or development of actual cancers, because your immune system's not recognizing it. And after a while, it disintegrates down and down and down. And so it has still pieces of you left in it, right? Some genetic propensity that is still yours, but it's mutated so much that it's like an object that doesn't, equate to your body. And so your immune system becomes immunotolerant. That's what I tell it. And so it's not recognizing that it needs to kill those cells off. And so that can happen for many different reasons. One being the bucket analogy, right? Your bucket's just getting full. And so, that's where, David, you would be like, WTF, why me? Because my bucket shouldn't be full, right? Like I'm doing the things to detox. I'm doing the things, I'm eating well, I'm sleeping well, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm hydrating. My bucket shouldn't be full. but what else is there, right? And so that's where we have to start looking at, history of autoimmune conditions. We have to start looking at genetics. Like there's a lot bigger impacts there, right, that we have to think about.
I would love to just even get your opinion or, your experience on the opposite. So those patients that have come in when it's quite obvious that their bucket was quite full.
Yeah.
So perhaps those factors, all of those factors filled up that bucket, whether it's lifestyle or diet,
stress,
or genetics or environmental toxins, there are certain occupation. So those patients who've come in and said, I've had cancer, and you're looking at them saying, okay, clinically, I can see all of these things that are stacking up to a full bucket. How do you approach that, even just as a doctor, and have those conversations with the patients that you balance out the, because, you never want blame or saying this could have caused it, and yet you need to move forward and adapt and create a healthier environment. So do you struggle with that conversation or?
No, because I'm a pretty sharpshooter. Like I'm pretty honest, right? So,
okay.
And I'm also an optimist. So, I have welders, for example, that likely got cancer from their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'll say to them, look, if you're not willing to change your job, what are we willing to do? How aggressive do we want to be? Right? What is it that we want to do here? And it comes back to the analogy of, are you the stock broker? Are you, playing on the stock market? Are you buying mutual funds? Or are you putting your money in your mattress? Because I'll be honest, these are the things that are on your list that are likely contributing, or they increase your risk. That's the other thing I start talking about. It's not a for sure. My grandmother smoked for like 80 years and never got lung cancer. And every time one of the ridiculous studies that came out and said, oh, smoking equals lung cancer, she was like, I'm 85 and I've smoked a pack a day and I've never got lung cancer. And I said, okay, right. However, she did a lot of intermittent fasting. There were so many other things that kind of equated out to the equalness of that, right? And so then I'll say to a patient, like, look, this is contributing, but it doesn't mean that it caused it, but it's not helping us move forward. Right? So is there another job that you can get that's close by? No, you don't want to? Great. So then this is the aggressive plan that we have to put in place in order to make sure your body's able to eliminate it, right? And so, that's when I'm like, look, let's save some money. We're going to get an infrared sauna, right? That's when I'm like, you have to do 3 detoxes a year, and we have to start chelating metals. We have to do replenishment therapy. Like that's when we start putting the things in place that try to make that equation equal. Right? So that at least your body's able to eliminate as much as possible. And this is where, when patients are like, no, I still eat McDonald's and I love it and I'm going to, and I'm like, great. But then you know what your risks are. You know that your risk is 3 times higher or, whatever. And I can't convince you otherwise. Well, I'm not going to, but you roll the dice, you play Yahtzee just like everybody else. And this is the outcome that's possible, And
then equivalently, you would see patients, I'm sure, that are doing the opposite of trying to stack the deck in so many ways that it's cumbersome, expensive, overwhelming, and just not maintainable.
And that's where the one key takeaway with the Cancer Remission Mission and with everything that I do is like, let's make it make sense, Like I have a lot of really great, mentors that have been doing this for 20, 30 years. And I love their resources and I use them a lot and I refer to them so the patients can read, sections and knowledge and everything else. But it's never one thing. And I'll tell this, like I have patients who come in, like, for example, I can think of this case. Patient has colon cancer. She's 25. She's had 3 rounds of it, right? And somebody calls. She's actively blogging through her whole process. And so she stumbles on this blog and this guy tells her that she could cure herself if only she was a vegan. And she has to be strict every day, all the time. She comes into my office because it's too hard for her to do because she's in her 3rd round and it doesn't help her because she has all this nausea and all this other stuff, right? And she's in tears because every time she eats something that isn't quote unquote vegan, she thinks she's killing herself.
Right.
And I was like, no, that's not how that works. Like I feel like that's irresponsible of the person who put that on you. That was his journey, yes, and he shared it with you. But there's no reason or expectation for him to be like, if you just do what I do, you're going to cure yourself, right? That's not logical. He doesn't have her genes, And so then I say to her, so let's make it make sense. Let's say there are some vegan meals that you like. Great. We're going to put those in our bucket, right? And then we also know that you do really well with some intermittent fasting. Great. We're going to put that in our bucket. And then we also know that the meat you're eating isn't garbage from, Walmart or whatever. It's high end, small amounts. It's getting you enough protein. It balances your blood sugars better. Boom. Let's put it together. And now she can accomplish her diet long term, right? So she's not like willy-nilly going in and out. She feels confident in the food that she's putting in her mouth, right? And she feels really great because we have 2 or 3 strategies that were individualized so that she feels like she's doing what she should be doing. And no longer is there the psychological component of, oh, I'm killing myself because I'm having this glass of wine or, eating this meat or whatever, So we've really addressed it and put together really an individual solution that makes the most sense for that patient. And she has now been stable for like 4 or 5 years. And she was supposed to die, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that shows the proof in the pudding.
So what about people accepting, one of the things I went through thinking, about my own case was just like accepting the uncertainty in life. Is there anything to be said for that? Because you got to live your life. We know we're not here forever, but you also have to accept that there is uncertainty in life. And maybe that uncertainty, you talked about numbers and probability. I talk about that stuff all the time too. It just goes up depending on what you do. But like, accepting some uncertainty, how do you find people dealing with that?
So that is a big psychological component. And I think there are a few steps before that part, right, David? Because there's the medical trauma and the grief like we talked about, right? And so there are some of those types of things that need to be connected with. But I think the big thing for me is one of the things that we talk about in one of the last phases is it's called bravery training. Right. And ultimately, the big thing is to be courageous, right? Choosing things boldly and wisely and going, yeah, we may not know all the answers, but we can at least stack the deck, right? And if it doesn't work out the way we wanted it to because of some unknown thing, we've at least stacked the deck so that we have a better shot of whatever comes down the pathway for us, right? And so that's where the remission mission is really the most important because patients can feed off of that with each other. They're not supposed to be strong every moment of the day, right? You're not supposed to be always positive. That's not how that works, right? Mm-hmm. It's about being brave in making your choices boldly and literally, making the choice that is for you, because that is the most important thing, right? That's where connecting it and individualizing it is more important than every study, and every supplement that you take, and really connecting on that level.
Katrina, I'm listening to just your passion on this project, and I just love it's just oozing out of you, and I love it. I'm hearing 2 kind of sub missions of the Cancer Remission Mission, just kind of some themes that have kind of come out. So obviously, there's the one theme of what can we do to change the story moving forward. So what can we do to stack that deck, fill the bucket, and just change the story about the cancer. And then there's the second mission or sub topic I'm hearing you talk about, which is as patients have come through that acute treatment, which is invariably traumatic to differing degrees, how do we rebuild both physically and mentally and emotionally? But what I love about those 2 themes is that, and what I love about naturopathic medicine is that the treatments and approaches for both of those are, I would assume, quite similar.
Legitimate. They absolutely, It's one of the reasons why I found naturopathic medicine, but more importantly, that I felt like this is a group where we need to focus a big amount of efforts on from a naturopathic perspective. What I am finding in clinical practice is that there are a lot of balls to juggle for patients, and not everyone is sufficiently capable of handling all of that, right? And so, and what I tell patients is that, I would love to be the person that you come to for everything. But the reality is what I really am is a quarterback, right? And so let's talk about it. Let's make a plan. Let's like weigh the pros and cons. When the next person says, oh, dandelion roots, and I have a bunch of dandelions in my backyard, and I'm wondering if I should bring that in. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's do the pro con list. Let's make a plan, and then let's execute it, and let's keep coming back. But if there are bigger and more important things that we need to do, then let's also have a second place where we can do that, right? Because what I'm finding in my clinical practice is that I see patients more often than they see their oncologist, right? Once every 2 to 4 weeks, depending, but it's still not enough. I mean, I have an example of this where I've been treating a patient for almost the entirety of my 10-year career. A couple of years ago, got a diagnosis, went through treatment with me. It was great, and then afterwards, we start putting it back together. And I had just done some sort of like hybrid community detox, and she wanted in because, it was the right time and whatever else. And so we started talking about, in the detox about removing roadblocks. And she said to me, oh my God, Katrina, it's revolutionized my life. We did this 20-minute Zoom chat. And I was like, I have been treating you for 10 years and you have never heard me talk about, not drinking out of plastic and changing the frying pans in your kitchen. And like, what the heck? Like, I've started beating myself up. And then I realized that those 30 minutes that are there in front of me, it was like what's happening right now in my life. And it didn't necessarily lend to, or it was way too overwhelming to put 5 or 6 more things on that list. Right. And so that's where, an online community can be really, really helpful because you can go through these steps, from my perspective, I'm still seeing patients, one-to-one, but they're able to see me in their living room once a week. Where it's like a 20-minute clip and they're like, boom, I can do that. I'm going to go find the sales and I'm going to, right. And so so we're able from this tribe to revolutionize both what they're doing on a daily basis, from a naturopathic perspective, but also their lifestyle perspective or also their psychological perspective. Because that stuff doesn't like me just saying, have you gone through the processes of grief and sitting with them for half an hour is great. But then when they come back a month later, have they moved past it? Not all the time, right? And most of the time not, because they're deep topics that they need, more connection and more people. And, and that's where, you guys asked me about other people. I do a lot of referring, out, especially because, people have lost organs or, the trauma that we just talked about with the whole thing. This is where they need to be able to connect. But the thing is that not every person that we refer to is also great at those things, right? Because you can't treat this situation and scenario is kind of unique, right? And it's affecting a large percentage of our population, but it's still unique in the fact that we now have more and more people surviving from treatment than ever before, right? And when that happens, you have to start going, oh my crap, we're not prepared for this. We're not prepared for putting these things together. And simply taking an SSRI does not really help them. In the moment, it may give them some relief, but it doesn't really put the steps in place to actually fully recover, So
yeah, I think the survivor rate, well, maybe we need a different word, for breast cancer is now sitting up at about 90%.
Yeah.
Which bravo medicine, that is really awesome. But so much so that there's actually a new specialty called cardiovascular oncology, because they're finding that people who've been through cancer treatments are now living, long, but, they're having heart disease as a result of, say, for example,
lack of estrogen.
Therapy,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so you're right that it's a good problem to have, and yet medicine
totally
hasn't caught up yet. We're underprepared, and patients are the ones that get the fallout.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example. What I love to do is to start comparing those statistics with recurrence statistics as well, because I think that the place where we spend a lot of medicine helping people with their first cancer, but where we spend way more money is their second and third. Right. And that's because those treatments are harder. Their bodies are ravished. They're not in a good place where they respond either. And so I think to myself, for Pete's sake, if the hospital just paid me a normal wage, like not even a doctor salary, do you know what I mean? And anybody who wanted to, we could put together a really great, treatment course. So I went, well, forget it. I'm going to do it myself because this is just crazy, right? So it just seems like it's a place where, like you said, we're massively underprepared and we got to start moving faster.
Yeah, and it's hard. You were saying like you could see someone almost every week and it's not enough. And I can totally relate almost no matter what someone has. And I can imagine it's even more necessary or more a problem with the patient sort of population that you're dealing with. I feel like there's, I've wanted to send out emails to old patients and say, sorry, I've gotten better. I didn't know that then. Or either I know more now, or we just didn't have time to talk about all these other things. And it's like, can you talk about, is that the point of the Cancer Remission Mission? Because we need to be thorough and individualized, but that can be cumbersome.
So I think the purpose is that there are two things that have to happen, David. So yes, we have to do the one-to-one because we've got to know where they're at, right? We have to know how to put together an individualized program. But more importantly, we actually have to have some systems in place where we can talk about some of that other stuff. And so it's kind of a hybrid that needs to happen, right? And I think this is where the remission mission comes into place. The other piece of that is that I'm not the one healing them. They are them healing themselves. And if they're sitting with somebody else and they get a great tip from that person, or they make a friendship, or do you know what I mean? Like, it has to be bigger. Our IV suite, for example, is just a basic open space where there's 4 or 5 chairs. And the people who see each other on a regular basis, they love it because they become friends and they get to know each other's kids and they talk about, and I'm surprised about this because I would think that most people wouldn't want to, but they talk about their process. They talk about what they're fighting and, right? And they literally will go and pay and come back into the IV suite and shake hands and be like, I'll see you next week on Friday. Like that tribe that's based on, the movement and the opportunity and all of that. That's what we have to do because like you said, I can't do it all, but I want to create a forum where I don't have to, right? I mean, my bigger mission is to totally change the language around cancer and move it into an opportunistic thing where people can actually fully recover on the other side and develop a brand new strategies where people are able to relate to one another in a bigger movement, like globally, because it happens here, it happens in the States, it happens in Australia. It can be crazy.
Mm-hmm. Is there any process of finding meaning in what people are going through? I find that very helpful for a lot of people, depending on what they're going through, or maybe not depending on what they're going through. I find meaning very important. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how that might get in there somehow?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that equates to the opportunity of their diagnosis, essentially, right? Eventually, I mean, step 1, heal the trauma, right? Release the grief, kind of those big things where you're kind of stuck and you can spin your wheels for a little while. And then the second one is opportunity, right? What did this give me? Did it give me a moment to stop and be like, no, I'm not in a healthy relationship, or no, I'm not in a healthy relationship with myself, or, no, I have to set better boundaries. Like that, I think that's what you're meaning by that, David, is that, people have to go, oh, this happened to me. And yes, it might have been a wild card or crap, I didn't want it to, but what can I take from it and be able to elevate and, really become enlightened almost, right? With the process that they've gone through. And that can be everything from, connecting with others that are going through their same process, or, some of my patients will sit on like patient advisory boards at the hospital, like they get involved, and so that it can have a bigger meaning for them in some way, right? And that I think is when you really know that you're using it as an opportunity, because it becomes kind of like a hero's journey a little bit, and everyone has one, right? We all go through things, and that's the purpose. It's just that half of the population is being affected by this, right? And so that, the thing that is really important to the Remission Mission and to naturopathic doctors is that we have to find our individuality, but then we also have to find our commonality, right? We have to address both of those things at the same time. And that's where I think the balls can be troubling to, kind of juggle a little bit.
Can you talk about maybe one or two of the most inspirational patients you've had? Because I find even in my little sphere where I focus mostly on gut, like gut focused things.
Yeah.
I find some people so damn inspirational in what they're going through. Can you talk about maybe one or two stories that are like super inspirational for you?
Absolutely. So I'm starting to work with new patients, probably been 5 or 6 months. And her process with breast cancer has been really not great. Got found pretty early on, which is good, but she didn't do well with treatment and side effects, and so she started to put herself together, and really started to like sit with, deciding what her boundaries were, and not taking on too much stuff, because she is kind of like me, where she does too much, and then the reality is that she eventually decided she wanted to know more, right? And she wanted more help. And so she has a large group of people that she's one of the people who, like you talked about, David, where she found meaning. She found meaning because she started talking about how she got diagnosed in her treatment. And so now people flock to her to ask her what to expect out of this treatment, or, what can happen. And so she's become kind of like, a bit of a prophet, if you will, in terms of discussing the outcomes, and people really connect with her because she's been in the community for a long time. But I love the relationship that we have, because she went, okay, so I need to know more, right? Like, yes, I'm doing all of this, and and she's doing the filtering very well, like do this and not do that, and making it very individualized. But she's like, now people are asking me questions and I don't know the answers. So now I have to find somebody who I feel is a trusted resource for me, that will not write it in a way that is like, oh, this study and this study and this study, but actually make it so that when I'm talking to other people, I can communicate that information as well, which has been really phenomenal. Just the partnership of that, because I'll read the study that she has and I'll be like, okay, so this is what this says. And she's like, oh my God, light bulbs everywhere, like it didn't take me an hour and I actually get it so that I can talk to other people. So that case to me is really inspirational, just because I haven't had cancer, thankfully. I've just been on the outsides. It's not really my hero's journey in the same way. I mean, it is, because I've been so close to it and just had, been connected with it for such a long time. But it's not the same when you're going through it. And so her and my relationship has just been really positive and awesome and inspiring. And she inspires me because she just soaks it up, and it's a part where she feels like I'm a trusted resource, and I don't know everything, and she knows that, but she'll bring it to my feet, and then she's like, you can translate it in a way that really makes sense for me, and that I love. So
yeah, that's a big part, I think, of being a naturopath now. Is, a few years ago I was like worried, oh my goodness, everyone's Googling everything, but as you get better, you realize you don't know everything, but you do have context. And I think that's like a big part of what we do as naturopaths for people who are sort of confused with what to do next. And it sounds like that sounds like a big part of what you're doing.
absolutely. I mean, there's amazing resources out there. One of my friends, Nasha Winder, she just wrote her book. It's called The Metabolic Cure to Cancer, and it's great. It's an encyclopedia. It's all referenced. It's fantastic, and it's written in a way where patients can generally get the idea. But it's not. It's an encyclopedia, and it's a great resource. It's knowledgeable, and all of that stuff. But it means more to me than it does to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to them, I mean, it's the same thing as when you're like Google, wart on your toe, and you're like, oh my God, I'm dying of X, Y, and Z. The story that I remember is like when we first took pathology class, first unit was skin, and our professor was like, by the end of this week, you guys are all going to have 10 new diagnoses. And she was not wrong. We all were looking at everything on our skin going, oh my God, I have this. And and we had all these new diagnoses. So the same kind of concept. That's the context that you're talking about, David. And that's where, we still have to be able to connect and make those decisions for people.
And I love how, you say it's about patients finding their own path. And I think I just want to connect that back to what David was saying a little bit of find your own meaning, because I have a lot of patients who, wherever they are in their journey with cancer, have said to me, I know these are the lessons I needed to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And often you've mentioned it, finding creating boundaries for themselves. Or the one I hear quite often is realizing I need to ask for help.
Boom. Well, because cancer is all about losing control, right? I mean, from a homeopathic perspective, that's what carcinosum is. But more importantly, from an actual perspective, that's what the trauma happens. It's about loss of control, right? And the way we approach it from a conventional perspective is, if you don't do this, you're going to die. Right? Like literally, I mean, if you walk down the street and said, I have cancer, the first thing out of people's mouths is like, oh, you're pretty much dead, right? Like that's the equation that we have with it, even though the statistics are showing us that it's very, very different nowadays, right? And so that's part of the language that we have to start working on changing.
Katrina, where do you struggle? So as a clinician and with your patients, where are the patients that you see that you're like, oh, this is a place that's hard to manage, or, this problem keeps coming up and I'm not too sure how, where are your hard cases? Where are the themes or problems in addressing this that you find challenging?
I think being stuck in the fear cycle, right? That one can be really challenging for people, because the fear of it coming back, right? The fear of reoccurrence, the fear of having to relive all of that therapy all over again. That is a really big challenge for everyone, not just for me, but for everyone, even the people in front of you, right? Because that requires us to change beliefs, right? And that requires us to we can do the grieving. It's a long process, but it's a simple process. We know how to do it. We've seen it. Most of us have lived it, that kind of thing. We can look at finding meaning, right? And that's a really important thing. And we can do that, and it gives us opportunity and everything else. But neither one of those replace the fear. And so that's where, that's still, I'll be working with patients 2, 3, 4, 5, even 5 years plus. And, they're just like, they're waiting for the shoe to drop. And that's where the freedom, this is where, when I talk to patients, the freedom of actually releasing that fear allows them to completely move through. And that tends to be one of the last stages. Right, is getting freedom from fear, because it comes up with the physical things that you're doing. Like, it just keeps coming up over and over and over again. And part of it is also because we're waiting, right? A lot of times with these patients are waiting the 6 months to get the blood test or the CT scan or whatever to see, right? And so one of the big things that sometimes can help patients break through is that, they're waiting for the good results, right? They want the results to be positive. And I'm like, well, the results are not positive or negative. They're just results. Right? And so if you are emotionally connected and invested in them being positive, right? Because that's how you define them, then you're going through these spin cycles of, oh my God, what happens if it's not? And all of this stuff where you're not living necessarily in the moment and being able to unstick yourself from that fear-based cycle. And so we try to work on the belief structure and help people to, actually connect on what their beliefs are and what their values are, and then redefine them in their new life so that they can get freedom. And it's not about not ever having it. I mean, you can have moments of it, right? But it's about, not living in it all the time and not having the dark cloud hanging over your head, right? As you're doing it, it's not. And that's one of the reasons why we talk about not being positive all the time, right? Because you're supposed to get angry, and you're supposed to get sad and all of the other emotions, because if you're just positive, you're denying the emotional responses of going through things, right? So that's where we talk about trying to do the rebuilding cycle, right? Because we have to get free from fear, and the reality is, the more confident you are, and this is what I'll say to patients a lot of times if we're really stuck, like we're stacking the deck. So let's talk worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is it comes back. You are way healthier than you were when you had it the first time. You have the experience of what it was like to go through it. So you know what you want to do, right? I mean, this happens. I have a pretty inspirational case right now of an ovarian cancer patient that I'm working with. And ovarian cancer is pretty scary. It's not really well managed from a conventional perspective. And she's had a reoccurrence within the first year, right? And so that's a big challenge. Then the statistics are going way, way down. But she said, well, the first time I let them convince me not to do integrative care, right? Because they were like, oh, we want to make sure our treatment works. And she's like, and now that I've had a reoccurrence, that's out the door. Unless I am in an experimental study where it makes sense for me not to do these things, I'm not doing that again. because I know what it was like the first time, and they can't guarantee me that they're going to be able to give me the results that I'm looking for. So I'm doing it differently.
Right.
Yeah.
And coming up against that, a medical system that does have quite a bit of authority, and there's a lot of fear there, it's very hard for patients to decide against something.
Absolutely. This is where having us in their corner is the most important, right? And I will say, I don't influence your decision. You actually have to make your decision completely on your own. But what I'm going to do is give you informed consent of all of the options. I'm going to give you those percentages and the statistics, and I'm going to talk you through, and I'm going to help you find the questions you want to ask, right? So that you feel really confident about making the choices that you're making.
Right.
Because I also say, who's going to look after you? That oncologist sees 35, 40 patients a day. Right. And you look like a number, and they're like, sometimes it's depending on the oncologist. Sometimes they're not on top of what's happening next or what's going on. Right. And so you have to be on top of it so that you're going, wait, last time you said, we weren't going to do chemo and I was 1.8. Why am I doing chemo this time when my white blood cells are now again 1.8? And that's when they get the, and so that's where we can be very helpful for them. Because they can be able to become what I call healthcare advocates for themselves, and be able to point out, stuff so that there are less, mistakes are made and more capability of making good choices for patients, right?
Yeah, and I just want to bring up one thing. You two have been talking about fear, and I just want to say it directly. Is it fear of death that we're talking about? Because I'll tell you, with the very, very minor brush that I had an acute in-your-face look at the fact that I was going to die someday, and it might have been very soon.
I think that's a part of it, David.
Yeah, like I feel like we're not talking about it, and I don't know if that's
but I think
by
more
design, but that's what I felt. I was like, wow, I'm going to die. And you know what that did? It made me live better. And that's my little, I had a very, my cancer is a good one if you catch it early and a bad one if you catch it late. But that was my perspective shift. I'd probably get up a little bit early. I probably do more things that I wouldn't have done before out of like timidity or shyness or fear of people's interpretation of things. I say hi to more people. I make more people laugh at the drive-through. Like, it did have an effect on me. And I just wanted to know if the fear was the fear of death that we're sort of talking about. I'm
going to say yes and no. So I think the thing is that we equate cancer with a death sentence, right? Like there's always you'll read the obituary and they'll say they lost their fight, right? When somebody does succumb to cancer. This happens a lot. Patients will say, it doesn't matter, I'm going to fight it. And I'm like, okay, that's not how it works. Like you have to work with your body in order to eliminate it. There's a difference, right? The words are pretty big. And so I think inherently the fear, right, that you're bringing up is the fact that we equate those two things very closely together. And there's a distinct possibility, like there are some that are way more terminal, if you will, than others, right? But the reality is that I think the bigger thing is that we're trying to talk about with the remission mission is the fear of having to go through it all over again. Right? The reoccurrence, so you have to remember that there's kind of the two pieces, right? Like when you get diagnosis, deer in headlights, oh my God, it's so uncertain. There's uncertainty, I think, is the biggest thing. The uncertainty of what the outcome is. Am I going to be the statistics that gets to the 5 years or whatever, right? But outside of that, am I going to have to go through that all over again? Because even if I heal that trauma, I still frickin' know how bad that was. I still understand how terrible I felt. I mean, can you imagine psychologically if you're remembering the 14th or 15th round of chemo, like you were talking about, Kara, and then going, oh my God, I got to do this again 4 or 5 years later?
Yeah.
Like your self-fulfilling prophecy of how bad it was the first time. Right? So the reality is that I think that the two pieces of fear are the most important, right? I think from a remission mission, most patients don't feel so much about the death piece, although they did when they were in it. So part of their grief and trauma is to go through like what you talked about, David, and use it as an opportunity. But the second piece of that is the fear of having to go through that all over again.
Yeah. That's great insight. I never thought of that, and it's that's why we have experts like you on the show.
Thank you.
Katrina, what's one takeaway you would love to kind of leave in our listeners' brains as we part?
I think the big thing for me, the one important takeaway is just because it says it's good for cancer doesn't mean it's good for you, right? Like, I think there are ways to always accomplish something. There's a lot of discussion about ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting nowadays. And just because you're a vegetarian, for example, doesn't mean you can't accomplish both of those things, right? And so I think the thing is, it's not about whether it's the right diet or supplement. It's got to be the right diet or supplement for you. So, I mean, the big thing is just breaking it all down, finding the support network that you need in order to make those choices. The big thing is about, is it good for me?
Yeah. Is there one takeaway you can give listeners who might not have access to a naturopathic doctor for various reasons or don't have a community surrounding them? Is there a way that you can help them frame the decisions they're making as they move forward?
A couple of things. Find good online support, right? Because go and connect with some Wi-Fi somewhere. Mm-hmm. I have a tribe, a Facebook tribe. It's called the Cancer Remission Mission. I do lots of posts there, and there's lots of discussion from patients and people who are part of the tribe, giving advice back and forth. Awesome. But outside of that is just. Always ask yourself the question, right? Like, get in tune with your intuition, get in tune with the type of cancer. There's got to be 5 or 6 questions when you're deciding whether it's for you, right? Yeah. But the first question is, how easy is this to assimilate into my life? If I'm going to struggle with preparing my food on a regular basis, does that even make sense? Because eventually I'm going to give up on that, right? So how easy is it for me to assimilate? How badly do I want to accomplish this, right? Do I value this therapy or thought process? Really important. Because I can tell you, if someone told me I needed to be vegetarian, I would struggle drastically with that. First, I personally don't do well with carbs, but secondly, I grew up on a beef farm. So for someone to remove, the meat from my life, I would be like, this is a problem, right? So, so that would be the second piece. The third piece is, what kind of cancer did I have? Right? Like, let's think beyond it's good for cancer, and think about what kind of cancer did I have, because that is like, is it hormonally based? Like there's so many things that can help you determine whether something is important for you or not, Mm-hmm. And then, the next thing would be to just go, okay, so is this going to cost me an arm and a leg? How often do I have to do it? Like, get the ins and outs of what it is that you're looking at doing for yourself, because then, is there some sort of resource? I mean, even mistletoe, for example, which I love and I use a lot in maintenance therapy for patients, is like they have online resources. So you can actually go on to Helixer's website, say, this is my cancer, this is how long ago, and they can give you kind of a protocol so that you know how to do it, right? And so that would be another way that you can look for those people because if there isn't a naturopath close to you, doesn't mean that there aren't experts out there. You just have to find where they are and connect with that, And then the last thing is, just make sure you're still living. Make sure you're making choices about the things that you're doing on a daily basis that help you to actually live, right? There's the easy things like, are you sleeping enough? And, all of the, and are you hydrated and that kind of thing. And so make sure the foundation is there before you go searching for taking, 25 supplements or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to connect people with your, in the show notes, we'll put the Facebook group in there so that people can see what your tribe's up to. And I think connection is so much easier now. So we know connection is good for health in many different ways. So we'll connect people with your people and hopefully they can gain some insight from others or going through similar feelings. Because we often can learn more from people who are going through the same things as us, maybe more than the naturopath. So.
Of course. I mean, if they have questions about resources, they can always email me too, because I can refer out, right? Yeah. So just as you guys can too, right? Finding people that they feel are connected with them or whatnot. But the reality is, I think the thing is just try to do the connection, because that's the big piece.
Awesome.
What's your email? Let's just share that.
Yeah. My last name, COX, period, my first name, KATRINA, just like the hurricane, @gmail.com.
I love it. You are a hurricane on a mission here, which I love. And you actually dropped the perfect name for yourself, which you said you're an honest optimist. And that came through loud and clear, as did your passion for supporting people after cancer. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katrina.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It was great. I love talking about it, obviously.
All right, take care.
Bye.
That Naturopathic Podcast. TNP.
Hello there.